Hi, I just wanted to talk to you about how stress affects our health. And I'm not talking just about emotional or mental health, I'm talking about our physical health. This is everything to do with the mind body connection. And as, even though we know that, obesity is on the rise and how we need to do more to change our diet and our lifestyle. I don't think enough people really spend enough time thinking about how they need to manage their stress. Everybody thinks about stress in terms of their mental health, but let's talk about stress in terms of their physical health. So, I mean, when people come to me and talk about their anxiety and their stress levels, it's because they want to feel better in terms of, they're dealing with emotional pain. But this type of stress, when it becomes chronic, starts to impact their physical health. And it's really difficult to prove that, right? How do you measure stress? And I think that's why it's not spoken about enough in medical journals, for example. Although there are more and more, I think, social psychologists, for example, behavior psychologists that are PhDs and doing this type of research. And one easy, okay, let's get back to it. Okay, so for example, I've experienced this myself too. It's sort of, I think the best way to gauge this is, your sleep at night. Like, let's say you're not having great rest. Like, okay, it could be your bedroom environment. It could be, so the sleep hygiene that you do prior to sleep. But it can also be, these subconscious thoughts, these thoughts that just don't shut off, perhaps, and it's hard for you to fall asleep or disturb your sleep during the night. And I feel like this is difficult, right? Because it's sort of like, I don't want to feel stressed, but I'm feeling stressed. It's not as easy as, I think, it's not as easy as managing the things we can control in our environment, right? Like, for example, that would cause stress to the body. Let's think of a few things. Obviously, a physical injury, whether that be a bone fracture or, a concussion or something like that, that's going to cause inflammation in your body. And inflammation is the best way of measuring, disease in the body. It's part of your blood work. There's certain blood markers that measure inflammation in your body, and I won't get into them right now, but we have that means of measuring inflammation. And this is great because we don't have to wait till other blood markers are going through the roof. It's sort of like, okay, there's inflammation in your body. And if it's direct injury, that's an easy way, to see where the source is. But let's think of other sources. How about toxins in the environment? Your air quality, for example, or heavy metals that you might be ingesting through, eating fish, for example, or your cosmetics, the creams that you're using, etc. Many different ways of ingesting toxins that we don't even realize we're doing every day. So that could be a way. How about nutrition, right? lately, and the more and more I do the research and the more I experience myself, I'm feeling that a plant-based diet is making a lot of sense to me. It's sort of like just the fact that plants have fiber and crazy amounts of phytonutrients and minerals and vitamins, etc. I mean, a vast array, and not to even mention it's aesthetically much more pleasing to look at. Anyway, that's another thing that you can do to control. So, put yourself in clean air environments. Look at what you're eating. Do your best for sleep hygiene prior to going to sleep. Shutting your phone off at a decent time, spending more time in nature, throughout the day, sort of thing. Do your exercise in order to fatigue your body in that way. Anyway, we know that there's a lot of things we can do for our sleep hygiene. So those are the things you can control. But, and it's crazy when you think of it, like stress is difficult to control. And yet we have these other means of controlling stress in our life. And when I speak about stress, let's just make it like inflammation. There's so many other ways of directly controlling the inflammation that you are experiencing in your body. Like we have the means to control these things, and yet we still don't use that privilege of having that type of control, and it's such an easy entryway to control the inflammation, the stress in your body. So I want you to think about that a little bit more. Like, use these variables that you can control more in order to help mitigate what one has a lot more difficulty controlling, which is emotional, mental stress. Because often it's not always easy to know what that stress is. I mean, sometimes it is. I mean, sometimes people come into the office and just, can pinpoint it, right? It's my relationship. It's keeping me up at night, thoughts of this. It's my financial situation. This I know is stressful. But it could be something just perhaps far out into the future, or something more, okay, like let's say that you will be retiring from your job in the near future, but you're not quite sure of what life after retirement looks like, right? So it's sort of this, pending like stress that you just don't know how it's going to be. Or let's say you're pregnant right now and you're thinking you're going to embrace motherhood, but you really don't know until it's in front of you, right? Like those sort of things. Or it could be guilt and shame from the past that you're not willing to look at, right? Like that you constantly are distracting yourself from. But let's say, and I think the problem is that if you've lived with, anxiety all your life, or you've lived with guilt and shame and low self-worth all your life, then you don't know what you don't know. So in other words, you don't know that you are living with this insidious amount of stress that you've normalized that stress. So I think that's sometimes what we need to start thinking about, like what is normal in terms of stress. So I think an a way that you could explore that would be setting up more self-love boundaries. It's so important. Like this whole idea of self-love, self-worth, it's really why people seek therapy, because it's, if you don't practice enough of this, then you're basically living a life of fear. You know, fearing what others think of you, fearing what, if you don't do this, what might happen instead, fearing, I mean, like fearing for, let's say, even like your relationship, even if you have a really good relationship with your partner right now, or you have to ask yourself, are you dependent on that person to bring you happiness, or is happiness coming from within? And I think the best way of practicing happiness coming from within is allowing yourself to experience more joy in life, you know, finding the things that truly intrinsically make you happy, and embracing that and not being shameful of that. You know, like, where are you compromising your happiness in order to, I don't know, fit into society, or you know, like, for example, I just did a live yesterday about who is my ideal client. And I said that for two reasons. The first reason is because if I identify that, and then we are both aligned as a client and a therapist, we are going to do super well together. We are going to do great work together if we're in alignment. It's like, I'm giving off certain vibes, you're giving off certain vibes, and we're on the same frequency. And like I always say, the sky's the limit. You know, like, let's go. You give me energy by being in my room, and I do the same for you. And I tell you, these are the clients that make great gains in their life. But the other reason that, and I think it's sort of why I just decided to get on a live yesterday and talk about this, is because I've done my own self-reflection. Like, I've woken up in the morning and looked at my schedule and kind of like looked at the clients that I'm about to see, and I'm like, am I like excited about seeing these individuals, or am I sort of like or, you know, like, and again, it's nothing personal. Like, it's nothing personal to you, because I feel like, you know, you do you. Like, you just signed up wanting help. Like, I mean, you did nothing wrong. It's nothing to do with you as a person. And like, I'm so for that, right? I mean, like, you are a certain individual, you are a special snowflake, and you know, like, great for being you. But if, you know, when two snowflakes are very, very similar, that's when, you know, it makes a beautiful Hallmark Christmas card sort of thing. So I'm realizing, you know, what I need from the client, like what I want, and I'm not apologizing for that. Like, that's me doing my own self-love work, and and maybe, like, for example, I mean, if someone, and I have this request all the time, is sort of, do you direct bill? No, I don't. I don't need the extra admin work. There's enough for me as it is. I don't. No, I don't. How about evenings, weekends? I work, 9 to, I don't know, or I work 10 till 7, and it's like, I'm sorry, I can't. I generally am a morning person. Maybe, do you want to do an 8 a.m.? I'm willing to sort of work with you with what I, want to do. But like, it's sort of saying no to other people's requests and not feeling guilty about that. Another thing that I've realized about myself, and I'm going to do either a live or, a podcast about this, but I did explore that maybe I was ADHD, and yeah, I am. I got assessed by a clinical psychologist, and I'm not extreme. Like, if I compare myself to other clients, adult clients, I'm not extreme end of it, but I do have, how did she call it? Sort of, I'm, inattentive ADHD, primary inattentive with hyperactive tendencies. So I guess you could say I'm mixed, diagnosis with hyperactive and inattentive. So the mixed type. And I think, that's a reason why I love Zoom calls instead. I have no problem. Oh, and phone is the best for me. Like, I love consultations by phone because I actually get to walk around my office. I can, I don't know. I don't have to sit down. Like, even as I'm making this video, I'm standing right now because, during my sessions, I get to stand, I get to sit, I get to move. I mean, it makes so much more sense now because, like, I physically get anxious if I have to sit too long. And I used to only contribute that to my childhood upbringing in the sense that, my parents were always moving. Like, there was 9 children in the family. I mean, I don't think I ever saw my mom sit down. Like, I mean, very, very hard working people. And I thought, well, maybe I, conditioned that way. I always, I never, like, the whole idea of chilling and reading a book was not something that I really saw many of my siblings do or my parents do, although I do enjoy that, of course, but only at certain times of the day. I would never do it for 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon. It makes me anxious to think about it. So my point in saying that is I'm accepting that about myself. So I tell my clients, I can do in person, but it's not my preference. I'm straight up honest with them right in the beginning. And if there's someone like, okay, I can compromise. Not every session needs to be in person. I'm willing to work with you with that. Or some say, oh God, that's perfect. Phone, perfect. And it's very individualistic. I get it, no problem. So anyway, I'm just saying that, like, you do you build your self-love boundaries. There's certain things that are just intrinsic to you. Stop apologizing for them and think you're some weirdo. Unless it's really harming the people around you or harming to yourself, which is what we call, an addiction. Certain behaviors we know proven to be harmful to yourself or to others, then that type of behavior is something, you don't celebrate about yourself. And, you do apologize, right? But that's your work to figure out what that is, because there's certain things about myself that I also do, that I know it could be very I have a problem with that word today, individualistic, but it's also self-harming, and it's something that I need to manage better. It's important to understand the distinction of those two. It's also something that I spoke about the other day too, in terms of, self-love is also, I feel, a form of like humility, but that's also very different from, we're not talking about you're feeding your ego here. We're not talking about narcissism, like self-love and really staying in your lane in terms of, building boundaries about like what self-love means to you, is super important. And only you know what that is. And that's why I love talk therapy though, because, you get to explore that a little bit more with someone else and feed it off them. So anyway, I hope that's helpful. I wanted to talk about individuality, self-love, self-compassion, self-love boundaries, and how that all related to stress and inflammation in your body, and inflammation causes disease. And there's no greater asset that I can think of than your health. I mean, ask anybody who's had a severe diagnosis, a near-life death incident. They look at the world completely different now. And to me, it makes complete sense, because you only realize what you have until it's taken away from you. So get out that gratitude journal in the morning too, because it's super important. Okay, gotta run. And thanks for watching.